me soon. Hello and welcome to the Mentionables. We have Mentionable Tyler Vela with us. Tyler, where are you today?
I am in Greensboro, North Carolina.
And what brings you to Greensboro, North Carolina from California?
The Mentionables Conference.
And what is the Mentionables Conference?
The Mentionables Conference is a conference from the Mentionables, the group that you're probably watching this video on. We are having our first ever annual apologetics conference.
And what does this entail?
There are some great talks by Nick Peters, Joel Furches, and some others. And then I am going to have a debate with Benjamin Speed Watkins on God and the problem of evil, problem of suffering.
Okay, sounds great. And when is this happening?
First session is tomorrow night. Q&A with the Mentionables tomorrow night.
And is it continuing on Saturday?
It is continuing. The bulk of it is on Saturday. So debate Saturday morning, and then most of the plenary sessions are happening on Saturday as well.
Great. And for your debate, what are some of your, I guess, bullet points perhaps? Maybe a quick overview of your 2 or 3 bullet points?
Talking points?
Yeah.
The party line. So I'm going to basically be arguing 2 things, negative and positive. The negative is that Ben's contention of universal cosmic indifference is unreasonable and unsupportable, where he argues that the best explanation just is that the universe doesn't care, basically. And the positive point is that biblical Christianity gives the best explanatory framework for why we see the suffering that we do in the world and gives the only possible solution for it.
Sounds great. And you, yes, you have your own individual podcast and ministry. And what is that?
That is the Freed Thinker podcast and blog. And,
okay.
And emphasis on the podcast. I don't, with the time that I haven't put out as many independent articles as I used to be able to. So mostly just putting out podcast episodes.
Okay. And how did you get started in the Mentionables?
Joel reached out to me. He and I had been friends for a few years on Facebook, off and on. He actually drew a comic for me once. Joel, I don't know if you remember it. I'm sure you do. And then we had followed each other's ministry and shared books when we published our books. And when he had this idea for the Mentionables, he reached out to me and asked if I'd like to partake, and I said, of course.
Great. And what are kind of some, I don't know if expectations or hopes, desires, wishes for the conference?
1 million people. Lives changed, people crying in the aisle. No,
oh, and by the way, Joel is watching now.
Joel, hey Joel. Thanks for the cartoon so long ago that started it all. Some hopes. I mean, this is the first time that we've all been together before. A couple people have kind of met randomly, but this is the first time kind of all the founding members of the Mentionables. There's a bunch of other people now that are part of it, but this is kind of the first time we've all been together in the same room, and this is the first time I've personally met any of them, so I'm excited about that. Excited to hear it's kind of what they're bringing to the table, have some fellowship, enjoy hopefully, I keep hoping for a good thunderstorm, so you promised I'll get one, so I hope, but I think it's going to be a really good time.
Great. And so there's some ongoing talks between, I think, you and Nick regarding a certain doctrine. Is that?
Yeah, it's debatable if Nick affirms the virgin birth proper, capital letters, since whenever he does it, it's always in lowercase letters. So I'm not exactly sure if Nick actually does affirm the virgin birth or not. Because he just doesn't spell it like I would like him to spell it.
That's troubling. We should.
It is very. We need to restart the Inquisition for this.
We should. Now, your theological background is that coming from a Reformed background. Can you give us a 1 minute synopsis of Reformed faith, or at least a brief synopsis of that. Maybe not necessarily a minute, but...
Yeah, so a Reformed view is a view that tries to understand the Scriptures in the lowercase t in the tradition of the Reformers of the Protestant Reformation, largely geared towards understanding God and His sovereignty over creation in all aspects. So all aspects of our life and existence, all aspects of creation are for the glory of God alone.
Okay. And do you feel that having a Reformed background is helpful or non-important? Maybe not necessarily non-important, but doesn't play a big role in apologetics? Or would you say that having a Reformed faith is helpful in apologetics? Maybe that would be the better question.
Yeah. So, not to question back, but I think it's true. So I think it's helpful. But I think it's helpful. I have an episode, not to give a shameless plug, but called Calvinism as an Apologetic. And I do think that there are aspects of Reformed theology that are helpful in apologetics. It will come up in the debate. I can guarantee it. Dealing with the problem of suffering and God's sovereignty and superintending over all things will definitely play a part in that. As will, I'm sure Calvinism may make an appearance at some point throughout there as well in dealing with some aspects of the atonement and the atoning work of Jesus. So I think that it's helpful, and I also think that because most apologetics these days, or most popular level apologetics these days, is done from kind of a mere theism, a mere Christianity perspective, which is helpful in as far as it goes. Being able to offer some Reformed responses makes it sometimes a little bit more unique, which questions aside about whether it's true or false, is strategically helpful because typically the atheistic community is not that well versed in Reformed theology, and so are not always prepared to answer or handle some of our objections or positions or arguments as readily, because they're not as studied like they are. Everyone knows William Lane Craig's moral argument, but they might not be as familiar with the transcendental argument, for example.
Okay.
So, it's strategically helpful that way.
Great. Going back, two beginner questions. Maybe we should have started with this. What is apologetics? So why am I saying I'm sorry for being a Christian?
Apologetics is apologizing. It's being apologetic. Apologetics comes from the Greek apologia. It was a legal defense for something. It comes from 1 Peter 3:16, where it says, "Always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that you have." I actually think that using that to defend apologetics is somewhat of a distortion of what that original verse meant, but the kernel concept there of apologetics is there to be able to make a reasonable defense for your belief. And so being able to make an apologetic for something is giving a defense either positively for the view or giving negative reasons against opposing views. And it's helpful as Christians. We go out into the world. We engage people of different faiths and different belief systems, and being able to deal doing apologetics in a winsome and loving manner is always going to be helpful.
Okay. And how do you feel about the term apologetics in general? I've had some people say don't really like it. It's kind of misleading. Not a lot of people even know what that means. Do you think we should work to change that, or work within the system, or just get rid of the term altogether and come up with something new?
If we should be like subversive rebels against it or not?
Yes.
I'm not too bothered by the term. I think sometimes it gets a bad rap, especially among the atheistic community, which I don't know if it's mostly there, or I just see it there because that's where I go and debate. But a lot of times apologetics is like the thing that Christians do. When really there's Christian apologetics, but any ideology has apologetic. Anytime you're doing a reasoned defense for a position that you hold, you're doing apologetics. You can be an atheistic apologist. You can be a Republican apologist. You can be a vegan apologist. I don't know. Whatever the position is you're defending, that's an apologetic.
Right.
Whether or not that's the best word for it, because it sounds like apology, you could call it, Susaning for all I care. It's really just the making a reasonable defense for your position. So.
Okay. Now, earlier you had mentioned something about some atheists, and maybe even those who are debating, may have a better idea of what you refer to as mere Christianity. Would you care to explain the difference between what you refer to as mere Christianity and, say, a more robust view or reformed view?
Sure. Let me actually derail for a second.
Sure.
Go back, because I forgot something on your previous question. I think an important distinction is the difference between apologetics and evangelism as well.
Okay.
Apologetics is kind of pre-evangelism. The purpose of it is to give a reasonable defense or a rational defense for why being a Christian is reasonable, why it's the best explanation, all that kind of stuff, or why atheism isn't the best explanation, or Hinduism isn't the best explanation, or whatever it is. It's not the same thing as sharing the gospel with someone with the purpose of sharing the good news of Christ so that they can repent and believe.
Okay.
It's kind of a pre-evangelism in that sense, kind of clearing away the intellectual hedges that might have grown up around the evangelistic efforts.
Okay, that makes sense.
Besides that, to your other question, mere theism or mere Christianity, well, mere theism is one thing, mere Christianity is another. Mere theism is basically kind of the perfect God theology, perfect being theology. It's really, really trimmed down to just kind of some of the basic attributes of what an omnimax being would be: omniscience, omnibenevolence, omnipotence. Sometimes they'll throw in things like immutability and eternality and things like that. They're things that are core to general theism. But what you don't have is the Trinity and the hypostatic union of the natures of Christ and penal substitution, the atonement, and basically the entire biblical narrative and the gospel that is built around that. So that's mere theism. Mere Christianity is what is essential to Christian. What do all Christians have in common that we have in common? That I think is a little bit harder to pin down. While there are exemplars of what that is, I think the Trinity is one. I think
the Virgin Birth.
Nick Peters. By the way, like Nick wants me dead and gone, so I should be holding up like a newspaper or something with today's date. So there are some core things. I think the gospel, being of grace, being of faith and not of works, is one. But then you start getting into some peripheral issues, and so there are exemplars, there are clear examples, but then there are some other debatable ones,
right? Of
whether that is necessary to be a Christian or not. So some of those will come up when in apologetics,
right?
And those are important to realize because
go away, boy, you bother me.
Who's posing some objection to something specifically in Christianity. Let's say they're objecting to something. I'm going to pick on. I'll pick on my own tradition. I'll pick on Reformed theology. Let's say that an atheist came up with an argument somehow that they could disprove some aspect that's unique to Reformed Calvinistic theology.
God's sovereignty.
God's sovereignty. I was going to do something that was a little bit more specific to Calvinism, but
election,
perseverance of the saints.
A good one.
That they could show somehow that there's a contradiction in the idea that God causes his people to persevere to the end. I don't know why that they would use that to disprove Christianity, but let's imagine they did, and they thought that was a death nail to Christianity. All that would really show was that doctrine was not true. But there are other views within Christianity of that. So they would have only really disproven kind of a sliver of Christendom. They wouldn't really have touched Christianity. So understanding kind of what is core and what is peripheral,
right,
is helpful to the apologetics tasks.
Great. And would you say that anyone can be an apologist? I mean, obviously you are well educated in the Christian faith. We've talked on the way from the airport. You have an undergrad from Moody Bible, I believe, and you are studying for your Master's of Divinity from Reformed Theological Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina. Shout out to North Carolina. So what about the average person who just goes to church?
So this is where my my Presbyterianism is gonna come in, and my love for the Westminster Standards. But there's the doctrine of perspicuity is the clarity of Scripture, and there's this wonderful line in the Westminster Confession. Whether you hold to it or not, it's a great statement of what Christians have largely believed.
Your denominationalism is showing, by the way.
I know a little bit.
You may want to tuck that back in.
I'll just hide that away. But, I can read other confessions from other denominations and appreciate a lot of our overlap. But there's this beautiful statement that is to the effect of the necessary components of salvation are clear within the Scriptures by the ordinary means. And ordinary means is basically, you don't have to be highly educated. You don't have to be some type of super intellectual theologian. You don't have to go to a mystic to divine the meaning of the Scriptures. You don't have to, go to some, whoever to give you like the secret mystical knowledge of the gospel. It's clear for anyone what the gospel message is. And if someone is out there and they're not just doing evangelism, but they're defending their faith, and they're doing it again winsomely and humbly, I think that is a useful tool to the church. What I would say, however, is that being an apologist today is easier than it's ever been. The mountain of resources that are available to us for free. At churches has church libraries. There are, in almost every city, there are Bible colleges or seminaries that have libraries that are open to the public. Just the podcasting community, the YouTube community. It's just the huge amount of resources that people have. If you want to understand the Christian faith and how to defend it better, and you might not go out there and study all of the world religions or anything like that, but you might know, I work with someone who's a Hindu, or I work with someone who's a Muslim, or I work with someone who's an atheist, or I work with someone who's a Christian Scientist. I want to be able to engage with them reasonably. I want to be able to understand what they have to say, and I want to be able to articulate our view in a strong way, in a robust way, in a way that if they give me an objection, I might not have the answer, but I can say, hey, I haven't heard that. Let me go, find some information, get back to you. We've never been in a position with so much resources available to us for free and easily accessible. And again, you don't have to climb the 30-story ivory tower to get there. It is by the ordinary means of ordinary people that the kingdom goes forth. And so I think it is available to everyone, and I would encourage everyone to dip their toes in. We're called to be salt and light, which means we are to be out with our coworkers and our neighbors. And if you haven't come up against someone who challenges your views in a way where apologetics would be useful, I would challenge you to get out more. So I definitely think apologetics is for everyone.
Excellent. We've been on for a bit, so we'll go ahead and end this live session. Do you have any closing comments or words of wisdom that you would like to impart to the people that may be watching this now or later?
Joel, go to bed. If anyone's watching this or sees this and you're anywhere within striking distance of Greensboro, come on out and see us over the next 2 days. Or look forward to some of our other videos to come. Mm-hmm. But really, I would encourage everyone, whether it's the Mentionables, whether it's Cold Case Christianity, Reasonable Faith, if it's your local bookstore where you can find a book by, Van Til, sorry, we're Presbyterian, then whatever it is, find it and dig your teeth in and really enjoy the ministry that God has called to each one of us to give a defense for our faith.
Great. Thank you very much, Tyler. We appreciate your time, and this is the Mentionables signing off for now. Have a great evening.